Welcome to Mind Shift Power Podcast, a show for teenagers and the adults who work with them, where we have raw and honest conversations. I'm your host, Fatima Bey, the Mind Shifter. And welcome. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about how we recognize and deal with people who are in the autism spectrum. And our special guest today is Cheryl Pankhurst. She's a special education specialist. She's been doing this for over 25 years, and she's out of Toronto, Canada. She's also a fellow podcaster. She has a podcast called Teen Minds Redefined. So she also has a podcast for teens. And in addition to Cheryl, we also have Janiya, a 17-year-old girl from Amsterdam, New York. How are you both doing?
Good.
I'm great. Thank you.
Good.
Yes, thank you.
So you know me, I like to dive right in. So Cheryl, tell us, what do you do?
So right now I'm in transition. I have just retired from 25 plus years in the high school field. I used to work one-on-one with kids and their parents and their teachers to advocate, give them a voice, create as much of an inclusive environment, safe, and just educate them on how we can support our kids and how we can find the strengths and work on their strengths rather than focusing on weaknesses. And so I'm in transition now. I've just retired and again, starting the podcast, and the podcast will also morph into a coaching membership for teens and parents and teachers.
Nice. So tell us a little bit more about why did you start this podcast now that you're retired?
You know, because I loved working in the high school system. But what I started to really notice is, there's a lot of red tape and politics and bureaucracy that I was just decided I'd had enough of. And I noticed that when I worked one-on-one with a kid and collaborated and try to find out what's hard and help them solve problems with them, collaborating, not imposing answers, and then sitting down with parents who were struggling with their teens at home, or sitting down with teachers who just didn't understand what was happening in the classroom. That was my jam. When I had those meetings, I felt the energy. I felt like, okay, this is what I need to do. This is where I need to move forward and really help on a much larger scale in the podcasting arena.
Awesome. That's awesome. Now, I'm going to ask you this question. Why are people retarded?
Oh, Lord.
Now, let me also say this to the listeners who are like, why in the world did you just ask such a ridiculous question? I asked that question in that ridiculous manner intentionally because people out there really do ask real questions like that. This show isn't about presentation and impressing you. It's about reality. And reality is people still think like that. And even though this younger generation is being taught to be a little more sensitive, their parents aren't. Their parents weren't, because they weren't, we weren't taught that. So people ask questions like that. Now, I personally would never ask a question like that, but I'm asking that to make a point. But why does it seem like there's more and more people who are mentally disabled in one form or another?
Okay, so I'm gonna talk about the retarded term. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to say that because let's define retarded. Retarded means stop or reverse. And so if you're talking about mentally retarded, you're talking about someone whose brain has stopped. And so I think I'm going to try to be cool here, Janiya, and say cancel culture. That's one we're going to cancel. And, honestly, let's talk about racism. Let's talk about LGBTQ+. There's all terms that we use that we no longer use because we know better. Mm-hmm. We know now what's offensive to people. We know how that makes people feel. So even though it's something we learned, once we know that we're offending somebody, we're done. It shouldn't even be a discussion. That's offensive to me. That says something about me that's not right. So we're not going to say that anymore. Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah. I asked that because I was, looking for that answer. What about the people who are genuinely ignorant they do not know that that word is truly offensive because that's what they grew up. I worked with a woman because I teach sewing as well. And a few years ago, I had a woman that I don't know what her mental disability was, but she lived in a home, and she had to have a worker that would bring her. And I it was my first time really teaching someone with a mental disability how to do some sewing. I adjusted it so to make sure that she understood, and I just figured it out because I that's what I do with anything I teach. But she herself would say to me, "Yeah, I'm retarded," because that's what she was taught,
Mm.
growing up, and she was
Yeah.
probably in her 40s, I think. That's what she was taught when she was growing up. So to her, it wasn't an offensive word at all. It was just what she is. So for those people who have grown up with that word, um, just being used as a normal, regular, everyday word, and they genuinely don't know that it is actually offensive to those who care about that community. Um, and it's really those who care about the community that get upset because they don't see those people as, worthless people whose brains have stopped,
Mhm.
and that's how it's perceived. How do we respond to the people who actually still think that way? And yes, I understand why it's offensive. I personally don't use the word because I do understand that.
Yeah.
But if they don't understand that, is there a way that we can correct them without attacking them?
Well, I would say, I'm sure that's your terminology from what you know. But here, let me show you something. Let me tell you
Hmm.
something. Let me advocate for someone who may not have a voice to advocate for themselves. And
Hmm.
that's where people who are ignorant are just typically very scared or very curious. They just don't know. So I think as a community of humans, this is where we start advocating and we just keep giving a voice to those who don't, or we give a stronger voice to those who don't have a loud enough voice, and just keep teaching and educating and showing and just standing up for the people who are, the victims to the terminology that does not really reflect who they are.
Yes. Now, I'll share something with the audience that I shared with you, and in conversation before this. Um, I have run into people that are, on the autism spectrum, in particular, tell me that they have Asperger's syndrome, and I didn't know a lot about people in the autism spectrum. That just wasn't something I just didn't know a lot about. Not that I had an issue with anybody, but I just didn't know
Mm-hmm.
that the people that I thought were socially awkward, it wasn't just that they were socially awkward. They actually had Asperger's syndrome. And I learned a lot because I actually sat down with a man, um, he's a part of my salsa dancing community. And he sat down and we had a heart to heart conversation one day in my office. He just stopped by because he was nearby, and we were, I was sewing while we were talking.
Mm-hmm.
and and he explained to me what it's like on his end. And
Mm-hmm.
it was the first time in my life that I had insight into what it's like to be someone who doesn't understand jokes and doesn't get emotional social cues and doesn't understand certain emotional things.
Yeah.
I never knew what that was like, and I never knew that's what it was like for them. And I appreciated him being open and honest with me because it allowed me to understand a perspective I had never seen before. I don't know I didn't know what that was like. And so I appreciated him talking to me like that. Um, but what I want to ask you related to that
Mm-hmm.
is I think that I'm not alone in that. I think sometimes we think people are just weird or
Yeah.
socially awkward. Oh, that person's just a weirdo. They just blurt out whatever they want whenever they want. They don't have any sense. And because we assume that they're born with all the same stuff we're born with.
Yeah.
Um, and they're not. I don't know all the technical terms of all the stuff that you do, but I just understand that. How do we tell the difference between when someone's socially awkward because they are just weird, or maybe they're on the spectrum? I said it that way on purpose because that's words people use.
So I would say if someone is socially awkward, I think we could even just say shy. They don't feel worthy to be in the company they're in. They might just have difficulty making eye contact or initiating conversation. And they may eventually warm up in a comfortable zone.
Can it also,
Where
I'm sorry, can it also be like anxiety too?
exactly social anxiety can be
Okay.
something, and those are the types of characteristics of someone with social anxiety. So they might not be able to initiate a conversation. They may not be able to have eye contact. They may avoid these situations because they feel like they're not worthy to be in that situation, or their anxiety does not allow them to be in that situation. If you are someone who is on the spectrum, however, so Asperger's is actually a term they don't usually use anymore. It is still autism spectrum disorder. Asperger's was what they noted as the highest functioning of autism.
Mm-hmm.
So you could pretty well navigate the world with Asperger's. There was just some social differences that you would be able to pick up on. But under the umbrella of Asperger's, you would see that people have a very black and white communication. So, on the verbal side of it, black and white communication, they do not see anything in a gray area. They would not understand anything other than something literal. So, for example, you're in the theater and you say, go break a leg. They're like, oh my God, why would I want to go break my leg? So, and it's very much like that.
Yeah.
They don't understand sarcasm, and they don't,
Mm-hmm.
what they non-verbally won't understand is if you're giving them a dirty look, or you're shutting them out, you're crossing your arms, you don't want them in your space. They don't understand that. So they would still move forward, and you would be irritated that this person's not understanding your nonverbal cues, but they would not understand your nonverbal cues. Now, I'm going to just disclaim this. Not every person with autism has the exact same characteristics. So I'm not lumping everyone into the same category. These are just broad spectrum. Very difficult making eye contact, very difficult understanding justice in their eyes. So, for example, I'm gonna go into the high school, and my best friend has a girlfriend. Bob has a girlfriend. Girlfriend's name is Jane, and I see Jane talking to another man in the another boy in the hallway. If I'm on the spectrum, I'm angry. I'm acting out. That's not justice. That's
Really?
not fair that they are with another man or another boy, because boyfriend and girlfriends do this, and this is the rule.
Oh.
So it's justice, and sometimes they're right in their perception of justice, but sometimes they have their own perception of justice, of what's
Really?
fair.
I didn't
Oh
know
I
yeah,
that.
have one
it can
question.
be. Yes,
Is it like possible, like, is it possible like for like an, I don't know how to say the word, like an autism person, like a non-autism person could like be like very close friends?
absolutely. And once you understand, that's a great question, because once you understand the intricacies of being on the spectrum, and you're not offended by, oh, he doesn't understand the dirty look, so I'm going to say to him, I'm angry with you right now, or you're in my personal space, could you please back up 2 steps, or you're talking too loud right now, I need you to, like, if you verbalize what normally we could say to our friends sitting in a room. You could be looking at a friend, and you can, like your mother, when you're growing up, you knew that look that your mother gave you. You knew she didn't have to say a
Yep.
word.
Better shut up.
Right. So you think of parenting a kid with autism.
Oh my
They're not
god.
understanding any of that. So there's a frustration. So teachers will be sitting at the back in front of the classroom, and you will have a student with autism who's not understanding that they're not supposed to be clicking their pen or tapping their foot because the teacher's staring at them.
Yeah.
They don't get the stare.
So is it like they have like a little kid mindset? Because like when you're a little kid, like you don't like know what's like right from wrong, and like don't understand a lot of stuff.
Not necessarily, because a little kid, a typical kid, would be able to learn those skills eventually. But someone with autism may never understand those skills. They may learn them
Mm.
only because they're going to memorize them. So they might be able to, in social groups or social education, might say, oh, my mom's smile is up, so she's happy with me right now. My mom's smile is down. So, or my mom's mouth is down. So she's not happy with me right now. They may not understand why, but they start to be able to memorize the triggers or the characteristics of facial expression. Or, oh, okay, if my mom's doing that, it means she's not happy. Or, she's doing this, she's happy, and she's so I'm expressing like body language.
Mm-hmm.
So typically, someone with autism, although a younger child will develop those skills and learn them and understand them, someone with autism may never be able to do that.
Mm.
So yes, you could be friends, and you know what? If you could understand that your friend can sit in the same room with you, and you can both be doing video games, or you can both be doing something on your own and have zero conversation, that person with autism is 100% comfortable with that.
Wow.
And you might be thinking, oh, we didn't even say anything. How could, but that's okay because there's no need to say anything. Kids with autism have no interest in small talk, like zero. And you would say I would say to my students, hello, David, how was your weekend? Why? Not, oh, it was fine. How was yours? They don't care. Literally don't care. They don't have any use for small talk. So if you can understand those things and still be comfortable and understand there's no offense to you, this is just how they learn, how they communicate, and how they process information. Yes, anyone can be friends with this kid with autism and should definitely try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know for me, once I understood, and this person expressed to me what it's like growing up and not understanding social cues and, having to work really hard to get what people mean in communication. I really grew an appreciation for how hard he works,
Mhm.
at everyday thing. And he's a great person. I just thought he was awkward and weird. But
Mhm.
that didn't faze me because if someone's awkward and weird, I'll still be friends with them. I don't care. I mean, I know people got their issues and reasons for being awkward and weird. So it
Mhm.
doesn't that doesn't faze me. So I never pushed him away because of that. But there's a lot of people out there that will push people away
Mhm.
because they're weird, quote unquote. I keep saying weird because that's usually the biggest term that at least that I've heard used for people who are just different in any kind of way.
Yeah.
Um, and so, what would you say to those people who just see someone as weird, when in fact they may be on the spectrum and maybe I don't know. I think that maybe we should try to understand people instead of just sloughing them off as weird.
My first response in school to any teacher that had those kind of responses or a parent, I always said, that's somebody's child.
Hmm.
So there's your first. That's somebody's child. That could be your child. That could be your sister. That could be, you know. So step back, be curious. You can ask questions. We know we can research Wikipedia left, right, and center, but you can ask questions. You can ask a person with autism anything you want as long as you're asking them yes or no questions, black and white questions.
Oh, okay.
I wouldn't say to an autistic person, how are you feeling today? What I would say is, are you happy or are you sad? Are you warm? Are
Oh,
you
okay.
cold? I wouldn't say if I want to go out and make plans with my autistic friend, it's not going to be, hey, what do you want to do Saturday night? It would be, do you want to go to a movie or do you want to go to dinner? Yes or no, black and white, no subjective thinking. It's very on point.
Okay. So the subjective thinking piece is the biggest challenge for them.
Yeah. And in school is the same thing. I mean, when you're talking to teachers who want, you know, write an essay on the best part of your summer. Oh my gosh, that could send a kid with autism into a frenzy instead of saying, what did you do in June that you really like to do that had to do with sports? Like just very
Mm.
narrow it down so that they don't have to go broad thinking
So you
because
just
they're
have
very
to.
black and white.
So you just have to be like very specific towards them.
100%. Exactly right.
No, I didn't know that
I
either.
never
That's
knew
good
that.
knowledge to know. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, I know that I've seen this, And I'm respectful of it once I know and understand it. Many of them are really bothered. I don't even know if really bothered is the right word because it's stronger than just bothered, but very, very, very upset with loud noises.
The sensory issues are incredibly characteristic of someone
Hmm.
on the autism spectrum. So there could be a tag in their shirt, or their sock is on funny, or the lights are too bright, or the noise is too loud, or they're too hot, or they're too cold, or they're hungry. And sometimes what they won't have is the skills to say, "Oh my God, turn down the music." No, you will see their form of communication could be very aggressive, very loud, and it doesn't connect for you.
I have one
So,
question. I didn't mean to cut you
of
off.
course,
Is it any possible way you could speak sign language with them?
you absolutely could, but you would have to learn together. So,
Oh.
100% you could. And there's many, many children born with nonverbal autism communication. So they can't
Mm.
speak at all. So, this is where they would learn to sign. So, that's a great question.
Yeah, I didn't think about
Yeah.
that. I had an aunt who was deaf, and my mother, she knows sign language. She teaches sign language, um, and sign language is more complex than people realize. And I understand. I'm saying that because I understand your response, and that you'd have to learn with them, because people think that sign language is just one language, and it's not. A person in the U.S. speaking sign language and a person in Mexico speaking sign language may not be able to talk to each other because the
Exactly.
languages are made up in each country that they're in.
Yeah.
So, because it's a physical language, it's not verbal like we're used to, or audible. So I that to me makes a lot of sense. And
So
that was
when
a good
students
question.
first, yeah, and it was a good question. And when students first start to learn, when they come into high school and they are nonverbal, a very effective way of communicating is pictures. So we would
Hmm.
have our I had multiple students in my high school that would never be able to speak. So we would have pictures of a toilet, pictures of a hamburger, pictures of a clock, pictures of a sweater, and he would be able to go pull it down, and we knew what he needed. So if you can imagine, I know we've all seen or probably heard of um, verbally aggressive autism, or they have temper tantrums and they're throwing chairs around the room, and that is very real. But that is just
Hmm.
a way of them to communicate something that is just troubling them, but they have no idea how.
I have one
And it could be a
question.
very heightened response. Yes.
What is like the first early signs of like autism?
It can usually be diagnosed as early as 2, and what you would typically see, and I don't want to pigeonhole this, but many kids will walk on their tippy toes. Many kids will literally
Hmm.
will not get dressed, hate clothing, or will wear the exact same thing every single day without fail. They will eat the exact same thing at the exact same time every day. This is
Hmm.
breakfast, and that's only breakfast, and it never changes. They struggle again to make eye contact. They would struggle to understand any kind of humor or joke or anything that isn't black and white thinking for them.
I will tell you, I'm very sarcastic as a person. I'm extremely sarcastic. Everybody knows me, knows I joke around a lot. And so dealing with someone who's on this in the spectrum on the autism spectrum and knowing that they don't get it, it's made me a little more, if I'm aware of it, I do handle them differently
Mm-hmm.
because now I understand that they're not going to get my jokes, and they're not just, you know, weirdos or don't have any common
Mm-hmm.
sense because they don't get jokes. They just don't actually get it. So I have to make sure I'm explaining that it's a joke. And most of them will laugh once they understand it's a joke, but it has to be explained.
Mm-hmm.
And so, on that note, what advice do you have for the teenagers that are out there right now that may have people in the spectrum around them? And, you know, you said some ways that they can recognize it, but how do they handle, uh, people in the spectrum around them and maybe be nicer to them than some of their peers are?
I would say if you are noticing that they're looking uncomfortable, you could say, "Are you hot? Are you cold? Are you hungry? Is this too loud? Is this too noisy? Is this too bright?" And start asking them how they feel. What do you need? But ask them what they need specifically. I would say understand that if they're not looking at you or having a conversation with you, please don't be offended. That's
Yes.
just
Yes.
they
Yes.
don't. That's just the way they communicate. I would say you can ask them, do you need space? Do you need contact? Some people with autism need sensory hug, like a really strong,
Really?
hard, oh yeah, hard
Hmm.
hug. Others, no contact at all, but they might
Hmm.
say, I need space, and they could walk away for 3 minutes, take a breath, come back, and they've been able to self regulate.
Oh, okay.
And to be able to catch someone before they get to the point where they just can't communicate. If you start recognizing those signs, that's where things really come into play. Instead of waiting until, I know there's triggers. I know there's if you're in a classroom and you know that it's very loud and you're watching someone start to rock, or they can stim, their hands will
Mm.
go like this, or you can just start to tell. Then first thing, do you need your headphones? Is this too loud? Would you like to go for a walk? Just asking them point blank what they need, and understanding it's not offensive when they don't reach out like a typical teenager would.
Maybe trying to be more sensitive to them, and
Hmm.
That
instead of
makes a
Yeah.
lot
just.
of sense because in my school we have autism kids there too, and when I be going to like the bathrooms or going to like the guy's office, I would just see them walking around. Like I'll see them walking around like, a lot of times, and they'll say hi to me, they'll wave at me, I'll wave them. I'll wave at them back, but I just never understood like why they like walk around a lot until you told me.
Hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Wow.
I worked with one student who intimidated most of the kids in the school because he was very, very loud when he was triggered. Like very loud. So he's like 6'3", and he
Oh,
would
wow.
yell and he would swear and he would scream. And I would just stand there and just wait till he was finished, take him to my office. And that was his safe space. He could say whatever he wanted in my office. But one day before that happened, I said to him, how does it feel when you get to that point? Like if you're at a level 1, you're super happy, everything's working, all the temperatures are right, you're not hungry, you're not tired, everything's great. But level 5 is uncontrollable anger. How does that feel? And he described, I'll never forget this. He described this to me. He said, it's like a wall of fire right in front of my face, like a blazing wall of fire. And I
Wow.
thought, wow,
So they use
like
similes.
that's how he described it to me.
Oh,
And again, not everybody's the same, but that's just how he, like, my 5 is and so imagine yourself in a room that's on fire. What are you doing? You're
Getting
yelling,
out.
you're screaming, you're escaping,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Wow. Well, it has been really, really, really good talking to you, Cheryl. Um, but before we go, could you tell us a little bit more about what people can expect with your new podcast and where they can go to hear it?
Absolutely. It's going to be on any podcast arena. So Apple or Spotify. My website is cherylpankhurst.com. And what I'm going to be doing is typically it'll be a solo podcast for most of the part where I just pick a topic and I'm just going to riff on it. And exactly what we did today, sort of thing, just pick something and go. And hopefully, people who are sitting there going, oh, I had no idea. Like, Janiya was great today. And I'm hoping that I am going to be able to not just speak to parents, it's teenagers, it's the parents, it's the people who love them, and the teachers sitting in the classroom going, I don't know what this means. I don't know what to do. I want to create a community where we are all working together. So I want teenagers in a group. I want teachers in a group. I want parents in a group to say, "Hey, Janiya, what happened today that we would have been able to do better?" And Janiya would be able to help us with that, and go back and forth and just create this community of support.
So, would teenagers who are on the spectrum be part of the audience as well?
Absolutely. And I would like to, as we move forward with the podcast, turn it into a membership. So we are able to meet on a monthly or a weekly basis and talk about how things went that week at school and how can we help and how can we work together and how can we really listen to our teenagers and figure out, like, they're just rock stars. Sorry, you're rock stars. Yeah.
Well, I think that is awesome. I love the concept, and it's definitely especially niched, idea. But I think that that's good because we have too many broad, general, useless conversations all over the place all the time.
Yeah.
Quite
Well, I'm
frankly.
really grateful
So,
for your topics here and who you're working to support. I think this is really, really helpful. There's not too many people out there. It's people talking down and telling teenagers how, and this is the
mhm.
way life goes. And no, that's not what it is. That's not what it
No,
is.
ain't
There's
nobody
so many.
listening when you talk to them like that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
True.
saying? And,
True.
I mean, not just teenagers, but
Yeah.
none of us. If somebody's
Yeah.
talking down to you or at
Hmm.
you, are you listening? Hell
Yeah.
no. You still in the room, but you left a while ago because you on
Yeah.
a beach in Maui.
That's
Oh
right.
no, they
That's
just had fires. You're on a beach in Tahiti or
yeah.
wherever, wherever. But you know what I mean. So, but anyway, it
Mhm.
has been amazing talking to you, and I'm happy to support your new podcast coming up, and I hope all my
Thank you.
listeners travel over there and see what you can learn.
Thank you. And
And
right
I
back at you.
think that people will learn a lot from you if they just listen. I mean, in the conversation we had off air, I learned a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm hoping that does. I genuinely hope that does well for you. And thank you, Janiya, again for coming on and
Yes.
being that voice of the teen, and you could just ask the questions that we
You're
don't think about.
welcome.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you both. This was just so fun. And I learned a lot too
Yeah, I
tonight.
learned
Thank
a
you for
lot.
your input.
I'm glad that's what this is
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
And now for a mind shifting moment. I hope you were really listening today. I will tell you, speaking with Cheryl on and off the air, I learned a lot. I learned some things that I will take with me. I think it's important that we take the time to at least try to understand others who are different than us. Try to understand other people's struggles. You might approach them differently. Try to think outside of yourself. That's what I want you to take away from this. This is about more than just people in the autism spectrum. It's also about learning other people, seeing people who are different than you, and trying to understand them. My hopes are that in today's session, you are able to hear that and that you're able to try to get to know people who are different than you. It will enhance your life if you let it. Thank you for listening to Mindshift Power Podcast. Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel at The Mindshifter. If you have any comments, topic suggestions, or would like to be a guest on the show, please visit fatimabay.com/podcast. Remember, there's power in shifting your thinking. Tune in for next week.